All right. Looks like we're live. So I see there's a few people here already, so welcome. And today we're going to be looking at a mechanic inside of Adobe Animate that lets you create sort of traditional buttons in terms of UI elements. And, a lot of people use Animate for things like, just like character animation and things of that nature. But it can also be used for interactive projects. It can be used for UX. A lot of people used Animate in combination with Photoshop and Illustrator before dedicated UX kind of stuff was around, like Adobe XD. So what we're going to do is create kind of a unique, playful button today. And gosh, there goes there it is. Hello, Adobe Animate. So let's go ahead and start a new file. I'm just going to go into more presets here. And what we'll do is start a new document. Oh, and it's open on my other window. So it's kind of funny. I was going to stream last Wednesday, but there was something up with my computer. I think it's due to my upgrade to Big Sur. So OBS was acting like a crazy person, and it's fixed now, obviously, because I'm streaming. But it kind of derailed me last Wednesday. So we'll do that one again, the one that was scheduled, which was it was going to be more audio based. But we'll do that again in the future. But this one I've had scheduled for a while, so I wanted to make sure to do it. What we're going to do is create a new Actionscript 3.0 document. And, again, like when you create an Actionscript 3.0 document under platforms here, you're not creating something necessarily to do with code whatsoever. It just means it's going to use, Swift technology to actually render the stuff. So what I'm going to do is choose that and hit. Well, before I hit create, let's go ahead and change the width and the height on this. I'm going to make it 600 by 400. That 550 is just a little weird. And create. So this is from, I've got my outputs here and my warnings from some videos I was recording for my new book. They wanted me to kind of record myself just typing in all the code in the book, which is a little weird, without any audio, so no voiceover or anything like that. So I was doing that for for my stuff, for my book. And the book itself, this is an older version of the cover, but there it is. So Mastering Adobe Animate 2021. It's going to be out probably in February. They were looking at March, but I think most things have said February. And actually, I got the page count on the final book today, and it's 404 pages long, which is probably the longest book that I've ever written, just myself. So that's fun. And I wrote it starting I wrote it basically in November and December. So just every day writing. It's kind of fun. All right. So back to Animate. Let's get rid of this warning. Go to our timeline. So of course we have a single layer, layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and just set this to tall so it's nice and big and increase the frame size here. Because generally when you're dealing with like buttons and interactive elements, you're not going to be doing a lot of stuff when it comes to animation. You can animate that stuff, but it doesn't necessarily need to be animated. Let's choose another stage color here. White is so boring. There we go. Nice tan color. And yeah. So with buttons, usually you can think about things like, a button will have a skin to it, which is its appearance. It can also have a label, but it doesn't necessarily need to have a label. And inside of Animate, one of the unique things is that buttons can have a hit state that is actually sort of completely separate from the visual appearance of the button. So that's one of the interesting things, right? I mean, you've seen a lot of stuff over the past few months around people lamenting, you know, the demise of Flash Player and the community that went with that, and sort of like the creative projects that, aren't really, you're not really able to do certain things in HTML on the web. It's just such a controlled platform at this point that if you're looking to do things creative, the web probably is not the way to go, right? Unless you're doing little things that are meant to be displayed within a website. So, that's what Animate is better for creating content. If you're doing stuff with like HTML5 canvas, to have that canvas element right within a web page, not being a web page. A lot of things that people did with Flash Player like 10 years ago, they'd build their entire website in Flash. And, I did that for a number of years, of course. Anybody who was involved in that stuff was doing that. And it was cool stuff because you could do just about anything you wanted and you didn't have to rely upon the basic elements, right, that HTML provides. HTML is a markup language. It's meant to define, content, mostly textual content. Canvas allows us to create a little piece of real estate within that content and to populate it with creativity, right? So it lets us carve out a little tiny piece of the web that we can play within. So let's do a little check here. And let's see. Yeah, we've got a few people on. That's good. So, feel free to, and please do, post in the chat. I'd like to hear what your experience is with, Animate or Flash or anything else to do with the web, whether it's UX or just creating, animated content or interactive content for websites. So we've got our basic canvas here. And what I'm going to do is create, as I mentioned, a skin. And for our skin, we can use just about anything we want in terms of a shape. We could import content from Illustrator, of course. I'm going to use just a rectangle primitive tool here. So one of the nice things about rectangle primitive tool is it allows you to, create a primitive shape object that you can still have control over certain aspects of it once it's actually created. So if you're using just the regular shape tool, once you create that shape, it's more difficult to manipulate it in terms of its initial properties. Like corner radius is a great example, right? So with my rectangle primitive tool here, I've got my fill and my stroke over in my properties panel. And for the fill, let's make it kind of a nice blue color. Stroke black, cool. I always like black. And let's make the stroke size like 3 or 4. I tend to turn stroke hinting on more often than not, just in case. But that's kind of up to you. And yeah, rectangle option. So let's make it, I don't know, like an 8 pixel corner radius on all sides. And now I can go ahead and just draw that out, right? So you can see now that it's drawn out on the stage, I can manipulate it as a solid object. And I can also change its width and its height. So right now it's not exactly what I want it to be. I'm gonna even that out to 350 and maybe 130. Then we can use the align panel and align it to the stage, both vertical and horizontal. That works out pretty good. All right. So let's see here. As I mentioned, you can, with a rectangle primitive, adjust things like corner radius after the fact, right? So if I want to increase this, let's set it to like 20 or something. And there we go. Now it's more rounded. It's more like what I'm looking for. So. You know, it's interesting. I mentioned earlier how oh my gosh, I've got such a tickle in my throat. Excuse me. So yeah. So I mentioned earlier how how OBS was giving me issues last week, and that's why I couldn't have a stream. It's funny because I had a bunch of problems with Zoom over the past few weeks inside of the classes that I teach. And what would happen is it would actually, I'd be sharing my screen. The screen would actually freeze for the students, and my webcam video and my microphone audio kept working just fine. It was only the screen share that was having the problem. So I opened a ticket with Zoom after trying a number of things on my own, and I think it's going to be okay. Pretty much it all comes down to macOS Big Sur. Same problem with OBS initially, but I think this is a little bit of a deeper problem with between Big Sur and Zoom. So we'll see. They gave me some recommendations on settings to try, so I'm going to try it out later this afternoon after this broadcast and see if that works or not. Fingers crossed, please. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at this button. So right now it's just a primitive shape, and the shape looks great. It's kind of exactly what we want, although maybe I will thicken up its stroke a little bit. Let's bring it to 10. So that's a nice thick stroke there. And again, one of the nice things about working with an Actionscript 3.0 document is you can always go ahead and test your movie, test your content, and it shows up right there inside of here. Now this isn't a button yet, it's not interactive yet, it's just a shape. So nothing happens when I mouse over it. But what we can do is actually convert this to a button, right? So a button is a symbol type inside of Adobe Animate. So what we do is we select the object, and if you look over here inside of the object properties, we've got this little thing here, convert to symbol. It looks like a spade, if you're familiar with card faces. And what you can do is just click on that, and you get the convert to symbol dialog. So convert to symbol lets you choose things like what kind of symbol it might be. So I'm going to choose button symbol here because we want to create a button, and we don't have any advanced settings that we need to mess around with. But yeah, we can set the registration point. I'm just going to set it dead center. But oftentimes, I mean, when I used to do a lot of like heavy development work inside of this environment, I'd always set it to the top left because it's easy. Top left is like 0x and 0y, right? So then it's really easy to calculate both over and down exactly where you want things to be. But if you're doing more just strictly visual stuff, maybe just the registration point in the center would work for you. So again, I can choose between movie clip, button, and graphic. Movie clip and button are the only two that are actually interactive. So graphic has its own, unique set of properties. However, for creating buttons, it's not exactly something we would want to employ. We want to use button in this case, just because that's the topic I chose for today, right? So hello, Joby. I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, please correct me. As someone with a difficult last name, Labrec, it is, I do try to be aware of pronunciation of people's names. And I don't mind being corrected at all. And hello, Vanya. Is that how you say it? Welcome. And let's see here. Looks like we've got, oh yeah, we've like doubled the number of people we have on here. So that's cool. Welcome everyone, of course. And feel free to post anything in the chat, ask any questions you might want, or share any reflections or anything like that. So, convert to symbol, we're choosing button. I'm just going to name this, I don't know, rounded button. You can pretty much call it whatever you want, right? Oh, awesome. So I pronounced Vanya correctly. All right. So we hit OK on our button. And now we have an actual button inside of Animate, right? Hey, Hannah. How are you today? And yeah. Cool. I'm just checking in. So I don't know. I'm like constantly, especially like during the pandemic, I swear every week I'm moving stuff around in my office here in my studio. So last night, I mentioned problems with Zoom that I was trying to correct. So as a backup, I'm like, well, I know my Windows machine works, and that's not running Big Sur, right? That's running Windows. So as a backup, I've got my Windows machine set up here. And yeah, I mean, hopefully the stuff that Zoom told me to do will fix things. And I actually made a mistake and created like almost a 9-hour cloud recording through Zoom yesterday because I was testing. I didn't mean for it to go that long. I meant to do it for like an hour to see if things froze, but I fell asleep and forgot that I had that running. So apologies, Zoom, for that 9-hour video that you guys had to process. Yeah. Oh, Hannah's getting her vaccine today. Very cool. Yeah, my mother-in-law got hers in Colorado here. Gosh, it must have been like a week ago now. Yeah, it's been a while, and according to her, it was just like a little prick in the arm, just like a flu shot, and she didn't have any weird effects or anything, and I can't wait till I get my sort of like turn in line to sort of get that taken care of. The sooner we can do it, the better for sure, because I am super tired, as I'm sure everybody is, of this, right? We need to get past this. So question, can that program create logo animation? Yeah, absolutely. It can. And actually, if you're familiar with Lottie files, Lottie is creating an extension for Animate that will allow you to output content that you create inside of Animate. It could be logo animation. It could be whatever, as Lottie files that you can use all over the place. So I am really looking forward to that. The lead developer on that extension posted, I don't know, it was probably a week ago or so, sometime last week, around progress that was happening with that particular extension. And actually, maybe I should pull that up just to elevate it a little bit here. I have to find it inside my Twitter feed. So hopefully it won't take too long to find that. Oh, here we go. Got it already. Perfect. So I'll pull this over. Let's see. Woo. There you go. You should see that. Oh! Look at that. Wow. Looks like it's out now, actually. Wow. Great. So, I did not even know that. So I signed up for the beta a while ago. And I was hoping actually to include a lesson in extending Animate and use the Lottie Files plugin to do that. Unfortunately, it wasn't available until about 4 hours ago. So even though I was signed up on the beta and so forth, I wasn't able to actually get access to it. So it's not in the book. I do have the final chapter on extending Animate. And again, here's the book in question, Mastering Adobe Animate 2021. So it's got a chapter at the end, chapter 13, Lucky 13, the last chapter, on extending Adobe Animate. But I wasn't able to get access to Lottie Files. But what are you going to do? For 2022 version of the book? Absolutely. So that's pretty cool. I actually want to just stop the stream right now and go check out the Lottie Files extension for Animate, since it's in beta now. Let's have a look here. So this is a bit of a, I wasn't planning on this, but just published the beta release of Lottie Files for Animate plugin. Your Animate/Flash skills can now be used for creating Lottie format animations for use on web mobile apps or showcasing on lottiefiles.com. So that's pretty cool. If we look in here we go. So I am going to jump on this for sure afterwards, but I can actually post this in here. So if anybody wants to check it out, who's on the stream live, there is a link directly to it. And I see there's some, as I'm going on about Lottie Files here, there are some additional chattering here. Yeah, so it's different from After Effects. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are the same, because we're dealing with animation in both. I would say basically like at the most basic level, meaning basically not like as like simple, but at the most basic level, Animate can be used to target multiple platforms. It can be used for interactivity as well as animation. Whereas After Effects can be used more for, of course, just like straight up video, right? So animated static content, right? So they're both good at certain things. They're both good at animation and motion in certain ways. And actually, I'm trying to get a new course developed at my university around motion. And my ideas around it are to include things like both After Effects and Animate, to kind of like give the students like all the different tools that they could possibly need for something like that. But yeah, I would say it's good to learn both and to understand what both do, right? So we are gonna get back to Animate here. I keep getting sidetracked. But there's a good reason to be sidetracked when, something like Lottie, makes their plugin available like that for Animate users. So that's really cool. I'll have to give them a shout later on after this stream to let them know of this coincidence, right? All right. Yeah. Oh yeah, and Hannah mentions, she draws in Adobe Illustrator. And Animate actually has an Illustrator ingest. I'm giving a talk for AIGA Connecticut in March. And for that, we're actually going to be pulling in an Illustrator file to animate a digital ad inside of Adobe Animate. So that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, animation, I mean, so many people overlook animation and motion content and so forth, which is unfortunate. And Adobe has a ton of applications around motion, right? After Effects, Animate, Character Animator, even XD has an animation engine within it, right? Photoshop can animate. InDesign has motion capabilities. So many different ways. Anyhow, welcome back, Joseph. We're talking buttons inside of Animate. It's so easy for me to get sidetracked on stuff that I enjoy. So apologies, or, if you enjoyed that little sidetrack, I guess I don't need to apologize. But in any case, back to Adobe Animate here. So we have created a button symbol out of our simple primitive shape. And we can see in the object properties here, that is a button. We can give it an instance name. So I'm just going to call this BTN for button, right? We'll do a little bit of interactivity towards the end after I create the button to demonstrate how simple it is to actually, have it do something. So there we go. And let's see. What we want to do is actually double click inside of the button symbol itself. So if we double click in there, now we're inside of the rounded button symbol. You get like this breadcrumbing up here in the edit bar. So you've got scene 1, which is the root scene, the root timeline, and then you have rounded button inside of it. So we're inside of the rounded button timeline. And the way this works is, and I'm not sure if this works. I know over Zoom, this sort of control does not work. Maybe it does over in OBS here. Maybe OBS is a little more accurate to what's being shown on the screen. But we've got up, over, down, and hit states inside of our button timeline. So button symbols inside of Animate are, they're really unique in that they have a predefined set of frames on their timeline with predefined labels and states on them. So this is our up state here. If we go ahead and actually run this right now, we can see that while we don't get any sort of hover effect or press effect or anything like that, we do get a pointer. Our cursor turns into a pointer when we hover over it, because a button in Animate by default is going to trigger that sort of thing with your mouse cursor. So we've already got the beginnings of something here. Of course, when I click on it, nothing happens because we haven't told it to do anything, right? So there's our basic up state. Now we've got an overstate here, and the overstate happens when you hover over something. So if you hover the mouse cursor over the button, then it's going to switch to your overstate. It's automatically included. So for those who are familiar with Adobe XD, you know how you can create a hover state inside of XD in your components, and it'll automatically be wired to that hover state. You get that little lightning bolt right next to it, right? That's exactly how this works too. You create the button, it'll automatically go to your hover state or your overstate when you hover over it. So let's go ahead and create a new keyframe here. Animate is frame-based. So you can see we had an initial keyframe right here, and then I included another one here. So in this keyframe, I'm going to change the color of my fill. Let's make it a little lighter. Use my color picker, which is way over there. So let's drag it over back onto the screen that you all can see. There we go. And we can choose a different color. So let's make it kind of like a light violet color. Okay. There we go. So now we have an upstate and an overstate. So if I go ahead and test movie again, and now I hover, you can see not only do we get the pointer in our cursor, but it actually changes its appearance based on the content of that particular state, right? So it's kind of pre-wired for that. We don't have to write any code to make it do that, right? We also have a down state. So let's go ahead and insert a keyframe for our down state. And what we'll do is darken this. So let's go to, there we go. And we could actually make the stroke a different color too if we wanted. I don't know how weird we want to make this, but there we go. It's very different now, right? So there's our upstate, our overstate, and our downstate. So now if we test, we can see we hover, turns into a pointer, it changes color. And if we click, it goes to our downstate. So all this stuff is pre-wired into a button symbol. So we also have a fourth state here. And this fourth state is the hit state. So by default, our hit state, if we don't have anything defined in the hit state frame, it's going to use the existing visuals to define our hit state. However, we can include our own visuals in here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a blank keyframe for our hit state. And you can see there's no appearance in here. And actually the content that you draw inside of the hit state, like, it doesn't actually ever show up, right? It's an invisible piece of media. So let's go ahead and actually create something in here. Let's create just with the polystar tool, we'll create a nice star. So just a 5-sided star. And there we go. That's about good. So here we've got a star. We'll put that in the middle here. So our hit state is completely a different shape, right, than our visual elements, right? And usually what I do whenever I have anything inside of Animate that's meant to be invisible, whether it's guides, whether it's a mask or something like that, I always just take it to this green color here. And we don't really need the strokes. I'm going to remove that. So now this will tell me immediately like, wow, like that. Okay, that isn't meant to be viewed by the user, right? So welcome, Bruce. Yeah, Animate is cool. Give it a shot. Try it out. Depending on your needs, it can do lots and lots of different things. So depending upon where you're coming to animate from, kind of depends on how you use it, you know? The name Animate, you know, it sounds like it's only for animation, but it can actually be used for so much more stuff. But it's very good at animation too. So we've got our hit state shape defined. So now if I go ahead and do a test movie, notice if I hover over this, it doesn't turn into a pointer anymore, and it doesn't trigger that overstate anymore. And the reason for that is because our hit state is defined by that star. So we can't see the star, but whenever we hover over any of those 5 points, you can see how it triggers that overstate. So this makes things really interesting when it comes to sort of like creative interfaces and, you know, making things just that aren't quite meant to be, you know, altogether usable, something more exploratory. You can create hit states that are completely separate from your visual content. So like if I take this star shape and I move it way over here to the upper left, right? It's completely divorced from our button now, the visual elements of our button. So let's go ahead and test movie again. So now, like I can't click the button. Nothing happens, absolutely nothing, unless I actually hover over this area up here, and I can click up there and I can change the button state as much as I want. So that is, that's pretty cool, you know? So something else we can do, like if we wanted to take this and we wanted to actually use it inside of an HTML canvas element instead of like this right here is just sort of like a prototype, right? But if we want to implement this, I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to do File, New. And let's say I want to create something for the web. So this will create stuff for the native web, 640 by 480. That's fine. You can see it's going to target HTML5 canvas. So that is the canvas element within the HTML5 spec. Let's go ahead and create that. It'll run in the native web browser without any need for like plugins and stuff like that, you know, since plugins aren't really a thing anymore. So let's change the stage color again to make it a little nicer looking. There we go. And what we can do is go to our library. Now, the library here, this is the library for Untitled 2, which is this canvas document that I just created. However, I also have access to any other document libraries that are opened here. So I can go to Untitled 1, which happens to have our rounded button symbol inside of it, right? So this way I can make use of symbols and other assets that I created in other documents inside of this document, even though they're two completely separate document types. So, you know, that first one I created is targeting Swift, Actionscript 3.0. This one, Untitled 2, is targeting HTML5 canvas, but it doesn't matter. I can still use that same button symbol within. Let's go ahead and center that to my stage here. And you can see there is my button symbol. Now, if I test movie now inside of my canvas project, it opened up over here, of course. This is actually going to open up inside of our web browser. You can see it right there. And of course, I've got my little star up here, so it still exists exactly the same as it did inside of our other document type. Which, you know, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, you don't have to like move it from library to library. You can just drag it from another document directly into the document you're using from its library, and it works just fine. You can also copy and paste elements across document types. It's super, super versatile. So probably the first thing I want to do in here to make this button work a little better is to go into its timeline and just get rid of that. I don't need that hit state there, and I'm actually going to clear that keyframe. So the hit state's going to be the shape of the actual button itself, right? Let's go back to scene 1. Let's make this interactive in some way. What I'm going to do is give this button an instance name. I'm going to call it BTN. So an instance name inside of Animate is how you make objects usable for code. So we're going to be writing a little bit of JavaScript to make this button work. But in order to do that, we need to give it a name so that we can address it, right? So this name is going to be BTN for button. So there we go. There's our BTN. And we also want to, at this point, let's go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm going to rename this first layer, layer 1, to button. We can actually lock that down. We're done with it. For layer 2, I'm going to name this actions because this is going to contain all of our code. Inside of Animate, code is generally bound to keyframes. It doesn't have to be. So there are ways when dealing with HTML5 canvas, you can bind your code to keyframes, but you can also create it as global scripts, or you can even include JavaScript using the include mechanism. It's the same thing if you're dealing with Actionscript, if you're dealing with Adobe Air as a runtime, targeting iOS or Android or something like that. You know, Actionscript is a more refined language. It's very object oriented, and it allows you to create like full classes and packages that you can use to invoke and upon different objects. Like you could have your button actually make use of an external class. And these can be used as separate class files as well. So there's different ways to use code inside of Animate, both inside of the application and, if you prefer to write your code outside, that works too. But you don't need to use code at all if you don't want to inside of Animate either. And actually, when we create this button, I'm going to use something called the Actions Wizard that's going to write the code for us because it is so simple. So inside of my Actions layer here, I've got a blank keyframe, an empty keyframe. And if I go up here and on my frame properties, I've got this little symbol right here that'll open up my Actions panel. So here's my Actions panel, and I've got a script window where I could write code if I wanted to. But I can also add my code using the Actions Wizard, which this button takes me to right here. So once I click that, I get sort of a step-by-step walkthrough of what I might want to be doing. So what do we want to do here? We've got a bunch of different items. So we can do lots of different navigation across the timeline. We can go to web page, whatever. I'm just going to say go to web page right here. I'm going to replace this with some code in a little bit. But go to web page is going to invoke a window.open. And by default, it's going to go to adobe.com. But we can, of course, change that to whatever we want. Let's hit next. And I want to do this on a mouse click. So when somebody clicks, so I'm going to choose on mouse click. And then it's like, well, what kind of object should listen for this mouse click? And in that case, you can see because I gave that button instance an instance name of BTN, there we go. We got BTN we can choose. And then I can hit finish and add. And then we got our code, and it's got a lot of comments in it. I usually get rid of these comments. They're useful for people who have never done it before to know exactly how these things work. But I remove them just for simplicity's sake, so I can more cleanly read the code, right? So you can see right here, right now, on the button click, it's opening a new window. I don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I just want to write a message to the console or maybe have an alert, right? So I'm going to say alert. And then I can put a little message in here as a string. So, hey, Joseph. Oops, not Joseph 1. Joseph, exclamation point. So, hey, Joseph. So now let's go ahead and test movie. All right, so it's made a new version of this here. So now when I hover over, I do get the pointer again, and I get, the color change and so forth. And if I click on it, it tells me, hey, Joseph. I'm like, oh, hey, the little thing I just made. How are you doing? It's like, oh, great. Thanks for making me. Cool. Yeah. So you can do all sorts of things with buttons. Buttons can be used to control the timeline. They can control internal timelines. So if you had like a character that was meant to be interactive in like a game type setting, Animate can be used to create games. It's used for a lot of games. You could control the characters with your normal key presses from a keyboard or through a series of UI buttons that are actually visual that you could click on, or even on a mobile device, you could just tap and so forth. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done inside of this Behance channel in Animate has been more animated stuff, right? We've done a lot of stuff with inverse kinematics and layer parenting and things like that. We did some weird stuff a while ago with some 3D content from Adobe Dimension that we brought in. There's lots of things you can do, but we haven't quite looked at this sort of interactivity yet and the construction of buttons for sure. So I just wanted to take today to go over some of the fundamentals of how to create and make use of button symbols within Adobe Animate. And I think we've done that pretty well. So that's great. All right. And that's basically what I have today. I've got my class starting in about an hour. So I am probably going to call quits on this and and get to thinking about that, right? So in my class this afternoon, so my class is it's called Software and Design Applications, and it's basically we do a different set of Creative Cloud applications every week for the students. This is a university class, and today we're still early in the semester, and we're finishing up Adobe Spark Post and Adobe Spark Page. Next week we hit Lightroom, so yeah, it's a progressive thing. Anyway, everybody who joined, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you learned something from the stuff we went over today. I don't know. I use Animate for so many different things. Like one of my students actually asked me on Monday's class, like what's your favorite application? And we haven't even hardly touched any applications yet, and obviously I said, well, Animate. Even though I use other stuff all the time, Photoshop, of course, Illustrator. I really like some of the newer stuff like XD and Dimension, but Animate is very special, I think. And yeah, so those are my thoughts on that. All right. So everybody, again, thank you. And I plan on being back here next Wednesday at the same time. I may do a few additional things from here and there, especially more late night things. If you look in my replays, I was doing some stuff with audio at night. So audio, I can't do audio stuff during the day. It doesn't work for me. It has to be a nighttime thing. And so I did some audio stuff at night for a community event. Must have been like 3 or 4 weeks ago now. It was a while ago. But there are other things that I'm going to be doing because I'm trying to flex those muscles a little more in 2021. So with that, I'll shut up. Thank you all. And I may see you again. Anybody who's watching the replay, thank you for watching. And I'm basically here, I try to be here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, and then at random nightly times whenever I feel like it. So, all right, I am going to end this stream. And again, thank you so much.